Welcome to Beyond the Pixel, Episode 3. They say third time's a charm, but you know when we're involved, we always bring the charm.
Always bring the charm.
I'm Luis Fernandez Sandrin, technical designer, and joining me is digital artist Ken Hao. One of these days I'll nail this intro.
Well, we have plenty of more chances to go. Yeah. How's it going?
It's going good.
It's going good?
I've gone past my recovery period. I have processed my emotions. I am ready, Ken, to talk about The Last of Us.
5 stages of grief?
Yeah, the 5 stages of The Last of Us. There's the first stage of us, and then the second stage of us, and then there's the last stage of us. So
I have a little secret. So I actually told you this before, or earlier just now. I got spoiled for The Last of Us 2. Some major spoilers of stuff that happened early on and then stuff that happened afterwards. So I just went on and binged a bunch of videos on The Last of Us 1, so I got all caught up. So I can at least relate to you on The Last of Us 1 story summary, and then I'll be interested to hear what you think of how they took this next chapter.
All right. Well, let's just get into it then. The way I want to separate this is, okay. Let's get the big thing off the chest first. I love this game. I love this game a lot. To me, it is one of the best games I have played this whole generation.
Wow.
I would put it up there with Sekiro, Nier Automata. Those games that I've held dearly in my heart of hearts, that hit me in ways beyond how a simple game can hit me. Yeah. And in all the ways video games can hit you. I adore this game. Let me spend the next hour and a half explaining to you why.
So, how would you react to some of those people online right now who are kind of naysayers to...
I do want to talk about that because I think there's an interesting phenomena happening there.
Yeah.
And I want to take some time and discuss that in the end once we've gone through the game, because there is something happening there that I think it's important to talk about.
You want to do gameplay first?
I want to do gameplay first because, you know, I'm a designer. I like talking about how games play. So,
game designer.
A bit over an overview. The Last of Us is the second game in a game that's is strongly story-based. And its gameplay is composed mostly of stealth action gameplay as you fight both these infected humans that have basically turned the world into a post-apocalypse. And it's set about 20-25 years after the events. So people are not very good people. It turns out The Last of Us are not the best of us. They do what they need to survive.
Nicely done.
Thank you. So... The second game picks up after the events of the first game pretty immediately.
This is going to be a non-spoiler review, right? We're doing a totally non-spoiler review.
Totally non-spoiler. I'm not going to discuss anything in the story. The basic premise is that Ellie, a girl that was rescued by the main character of the first game, Joel, has a very tragic event happen to her at the beginning of this game, and she goes on a revenge mission against people that wronged her. That's
basic premise.
That's all I'm gonna talk about.
And that's what was kind of hinted at the trailer that they revealed.
Yeah. I'm not gonna show any footage as well if anyone's worried. Like, this is all these screenshots. These are the only screenshots that we're gonna show.
They're all very cognizant that it's only been out for less than 2 weeks, less than 1 week.
Yeah. I'm gonna talk about certain encounters. I'm gonna talk about certain enemies that you're gonna fight. Anything that's not shown in promotional materials, I'll give you a heads up before I discuss that. Okay. So let's talk about the gameplay.
You played through the entire thing.
Yes.
Even though it's
yes. I beat the entire thing. I wasn't spoiled by anything. I played it through. Did
you beat it really quickly so that you wouldn't get spoiled?
Yes. Okay, because I needed to know.
I totally understand.
I needed to know because there was such a pushback against it that I needed to know why people were complaining about, and I know why they were. And
so wait, before you get started though, I remember before we were talking about it, you had read a possible spoiler. Was that spoiler the truth? Like, was that
I didn't
actually a
I
spoiler?
didn't
Or was
read
that
a spoiler.
fake?
I read the reviews and I intued sort of a gameplay thing that happens in the game
Right.
that would happen around the halfway point, and I was right about that. Uh,
Okay.
but it still surprised me at how effective it was.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
But I'm not gonna.
But go ahead. We'll get into the game.
I'm gonna make a spoiler version podcast with with my Destiny clan on Thursday, so I
Okay.
can go more in depth into like those things I like. But overall, broad strokes, this game does some really cool stuff with its design that I think is notable for the stealth action genre. And it does some really cool stuff with its exploration, and those are the main things I want to hit. So
Okay.
let's talk about the combat. It's a stealth action game, so you're going to be doing some sneaky crawly stuff and then some shooty bangy stuff.
Did they improve on any of the sneaky crawly
Absolutely.
or shooty bang? Yeah.
Absolutely.
How so?
The biggest problem that I had with The Last of Us 1 is that I loved the story. I did not love how that game played. I did not like
Generic.
how the encounters set up. It's not that it was generic. It was more that it didn't feel right. It felt a little bit clunky. It felt like I didn't have a lot of options, and it felt... It didn't feel like it evolved too much over time. This game... Oh, man. The thing they really nail is expanding the areas where you encounter these enemies in, right? You have more avenues of approach. So you reach an area and it's a wide open field and there's a few buildings beside you. Enemies can come out of buildings, they patrol the area, they may be inside houses, they may be in other backyards. They're basically everywhere. And it all flows in sort of a dynamic way. Because you reload a checkpoint and the enemies will behave differently. So they have their own set AI logic that they choose
Do
from
they rotate
behavior
through
tree.
do they cycle through a set of like scenarios every time you load in the level or something, or is it just kind of based off of what you do?
I don't know exactly. I know it is different. I know they don't behave always the same way. It feels they have a few options in their behavior tree of what they want to do at any given time. And I'm not sure if they start at different points on that tree when you reload, or if they just pick something different when you do.
Right.
I didn't keep restarting the events over and over. But when you do sneak around and you alert an enemy either by shooting them or using an object, since you can both use weapons or craft Molotovs or use traps or smoke bombs, silence weapons like bows or the silencers that you can craft for your gun. All that is based on who's around you, who hears you, who sees you, and what have you. And the encounter kicks off in that way. So if I'm stealthily killing people and no one's alerted, I can still keep going. If someone spots a body, they will like go see it, and there's a moment before they raise an alarm and say like, "Oh my God, they killed Alan or Nancy," and they use real names of these people.
They all have a name.
They all have
like
names,
name.
and they're not repeated. So they really want to make you feel bad about killing people. That's a big theme. That's a big theme with this game, is that they want you to feel guilty about killing people. And their dogs. Their dogs also have names.
I heard about this.
And they'll come by and mourn their dog. If you kill their owner, the dog will like stay there and like nudge the ragdoll with their nose and like cry.
How did that affect you? Did you avoid killing dogs?
No.
I heard, so my friend told me that he preferred using some sort of landmine that you could craft, because you could like put it over there and the dogs will sniff it, and then it all happens off scene, like off screen. Dogs die, you know. You don't have to
He's blowing up the dog though.
No,
and then he just moves on to the rest of the story.
No, my strategy is that, because here's the strategy in it, like it's a morbid strategy, because you think like, well, do I take out the dog first because the dog can like follow my scent, and then then its owner will like realize that something is wrong and say no, because the dog can't call for help. So I shoot the owner, and I shoot the dog while it's whining.
That's so dark.
It's dark. It's dark. It's dark.
I don't like who you've become after you played this game.
It's not good.
This game.
It's not
said
good.
exactly what it wanted.
It's not good. But it's also really, really good.
Yo, but I bet you that dog has some sick loot, right? That dog's got some
Nope.
good loot.
Nope.
No
Since
loot?
when did I like a game
Got
with
some
loot?
potions or something?
Dogs actually don't drop anything. People drop things. People got good loot.
No, that makes sense.
But yeah, so you have those sort of logic problems that you try to figure out. Is like, who do I kill first? Can I kill them safe without someone seeing me? Inevitably, you're gonna spot someone. You're always gonna spot someone. This is where the game does something that few stealth games do. Is you get spotted, people get alerted, they come and investigate the area, but because the area is so large and you have so much maneuverability, you don't charge into them and stab them. You run away.
Oh,
So you can run away. You like go through like these little shimmy quarters. They're like very thin, and like she does like this, like whoa, and like sneaks in. You go behind around the corner, and they lose you like fast. They lose you like pretty
But here's
quick.
the question though: Do they remember that someone was here?
Yes.
Is their alertness level slightly higher? You know?
They're
Or is this,
all
like,
no,
Metal
no,
Gear
once they're on
Solid
alert,
where-
they are alerted, and they will not
I
give
see,
up
okay.
looking for you, and they will call people over, right?
Right.
They will like investigate you, or they'll like go call
That's good.
someone or
That's advanced.
or do something like that, and then they'll all start patrolling, start investigating areas. Some of them will like group up. You see them split off into teams of two, and they'll go off because it's a wide area, so they'll go off and investigate areas in teams of two, and inevitably they'll split off, and you're like, here's my
The
chance. I'm going
AI.
to take out this guy, and you get back into the stealth gameplay of it, right? Because you're super fragile. And you don't have a lot
Yeah.
of resources. So sometimes you might take out a guy and you're like, oh crap, I'm out of Molotovs. I'm going to go and craft another one. Then use a
I
Molotov to
love
take
that.
out a team of two. And like, because they're on fire, they start yelling, right? And then the other people
Yeah.
are going to be drawn over to them. But if you set up a landmine right beforehand, they'll walk
Ooh,
into that
smart.
landmine.
Ooh, damn.
But so there's a logic puzzle that you can kind of figure out here. And
Yeah.
that's all because it is so dynamic. It is not like, I love Metal Gear Solid, right? But that game has a very punitive awareness system.
the game is also silly as heck.
Yes. When you alert someone, they go through their three phases, right? And it's pretty clear on the board.
Yeah.
And it's like they're in evasion phase, they're in alert phase.
Yeah.
The timer ticks down, and they go to evasion phase. The timer ticks down, they go
Yeah.
into caution. And for that entire time, you're like locked yourself in the locker, and you're sitting there, hoping that no one comes by and knocks on you. That's not this game. You become an active participant in like the stealth. Because you're not just like, well, I gotta hide, because the most effective thing for me to do right now is to hide until everyone's on alert. They're never gonna get alert, but they're gonna lose sight of you. They're gonna investigate where you were last were. So if you go and set up like a trap for them, and you go and hide near the trap, they'll follow you in there, not be able to find you. One of them will get blown up by the trap, which alerts more people to come in. And because they don't know where you are, you can flank around them and like shoot at them. It reminds me a lot of Splinter Cell Conviction. In that way.
Okay, yeah.
That was a game that used like the last known position very well, because you can mark people and then shoot them, and then if you're using guns, they'll go and investigate. If they spot you, they go to the last known location. But you need to melee them in order to get your auto kill thing back. That game,
I love the kill puzzle type of game.
yeah, it is definitely a kill puzzle type of game. It's like a resource murder management
Every
simulator.
time I play one of these games, I get into like mad hoarder mode.
Yeah.
Though. Like in RE4, by the end of the game, when I was fighting the last boss, my inventory was full of like rockets and grenades and stuff, and all ammunition. Just because I would just try to kill, I would reload and just try to finish the current level with as minimal resources as possible, and you feel so proud of yourself.
Yeah. So there's definitely that element of like hoarding stuff and not using your equipment in this game.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things I wish they improved upon, because they've shown me that it is possible for them to manage this. Is that there are certain enemy types, not just because you fight infected as well as humans, right? They added an infected enemy type that I think specifically counters hoarders. Because it's this enemy.
No.
It's this enemy that you can't get close to, so you can't melee them, right?
Right.
And you can't shoot them in the head and be done with them and use silenced weapons, because they don't die with one shot.
Right.
But they're relatively weak against your equipment, like your Molotovs, your bombs, everything else. And you're like your shotgun and your rifle, like the heavy
like
hitter
their
weapons.
Ammunition soaks. They,
Exactly.
Like, soak up all your ammunition.
Exactly. But they managed to make it so that it doesn't feel like it's soaking it up. they still die
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
quickly if you use that stuff. So
Right,
you're
right.
encouraged when you see them to use it. But then they do smart things, like with the composition of the enemies. Like they put a few runners out there, like the infected that just they see you and they run at you and they attack you.
Mhm.
So you might want to stealth around and kill all those runners first before you engage these guys. They're called shamblers.
Yeah.
With your guns, because you can't melee them, but you can melee and shoot the runners in the head.
Yeah.
Or since you have to use your equipment anyway, you throw a Molotov at the shambler. He's on fire, and that also calls the runners over to him. Then you throw another Molotov and you burn all them together. Right?
How many new enemies were there? Were there a lot of new enemies, or is it just kind of a remix of the old enemies in different types of ensembles?
That's the thing with this game, is that there's not a lot of variety in the human enemies. You have
Right.
you have melee human enemies, you have small arms enemies, you have long range sniper enemies, shotgun enemies that rush you more frequently. And they do a lot with that sort of composition. The main problem with the human enemies is that you can just shoot them in the head and they die. So it's pretty
So
easy to
simple.
take them out. Yeah. It becomes more of a position puzzle, right? More than like, how do I
Right.
take this enemy down? It almost
Right.
doesn't matter what the enemy is at that point, other than like, oh, well. And you can't even tell, like, really what an enemy type is just by looking at them. At least I couldn't.
Right.
I'm
Among the
sure if
humans,
you-
you mean?
Hmm?
Among the human characters, you mean?
Yeah, if you're paying attention, you can see like, oh, this guy's got a weapon, this guy's got a rifle, this guy's got a shotgun, but the rifles and shotguns look pretty similar at a distance. It almost didn't matter to me when I was playing it. It mattered more like where people were, more so than who they were. Except in one scene, which like absolutely screwed me over, where there's just a sniper at this overlook, and there's no cover between you and him, and there's a bunch of enemies in front of you, all with shotguns. That was a really hard encounter.
How is the crafting? You mentioned a bit of crafting for like traps and puzzles.
Yeah.
Is it a pretty in-depth system? What's involved? Is it just like finding ingredients? And...
There's 4 ingredients, and you use different varieties of them to craft different things. It's pretty streamlined.
Only 4
it's
ingredients?
only 4 ingredients. You have
What are the?
sharp stuff, bottle stuff, rags, and alcohol. Oh, and explosives, 5.
I guess that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense.
And like,
I'm glad they keep it down to a minimum, because sometimes the crafting can get a bit distracting in these kind of games.
yep. And
I know for me, like when I play games like Fallout, the crafting, while I enjoy it, it feels like it really takes me out of the gameplay and action, because you're in the middle of this firefight, but you remember you have to go search the toilets because there might be some duct tape that you need to build a gun
Yeah.
later on, right?
it's really smart and again, adding to the dynamic portion of the combat. It's all about what you have available at your disposal at this moment, right? So as you're running
Right.
away from stuff, you'll see like stuff hanging out in the environment, and you can just press triangle and quickly pick it up. If you want to make a Molotov, you don't have to go into your menu to do it. You can just select where your Molotov is, and you
Right.
can press the cross button, and that'll immediately take you to the crafting menu, and all I have to do is hold down cross again to build it. It's super
So
easy,
they like kind
super
of
quick.
emphasize the real-time UI, so you don't have to take yourself out of it as much.
Yeah, and it works extremely well. And I think this game, because I spent some time thinking about it, because I really didn't like the first game, and I think what really makes this game work is the fact that you have all this space to navigate in, you have the space to scavenge, to approach from different angles, and to get away from stuff, and to flank around, and just constantly be thinking, what is the best thing I can do at this moment? It is quintessential game design, and they improved upon it in every single way between these two games, and it became one of my most pleasant is a really weird word to use for this, same as enjoyable, but it became a really satisfying stealth game for you to get right, to get through stuff.
What would you have rated the previous one out of 10, and then what would you rate this one?
In terms of the combat or
Gameplay.
overall?
Just the gameplay.
I would definitely like
Thank you.
skew. The last game was like, it was playable, but I didn't enjoy playing it so much. I would definitely skew to like a 3 out of 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
So 6 out of 10.
I don't do 10 scales.
Right.
I don't like 10 scales. Because what's the difference between
Okay.
a 7 and an 8? Like, it's nonsense. And you're never going to use the
Okay.
lower end.
Okay, didn't realize you had this
No. Three,
scale issue.
3 out of 5. 3 out of 5.
Okay, what would
5 out
so
of
what
5.
do you? And you rate this game perfect.
No, I rated it a 5 out of 5. It is some of the
Sorry,
best.
I meant the gameplay
Is a 5
is
out
in
of
your
5 for me.
favorite.
Yeah, it is one of the. It is the best example that I can think of on this generation of stealth combat done correctly.
nice.
And-
Nice. That's very impressive.
Please, by all means, send me a message if you think something did it better, because I'll be more than happy to play it. Because I really, really did enjoy this, and I would happily play more stuff. I just haven't found a lot of very good stealth games this generation. I'm trying to think really
Right.
hard. What was a stealth game that I played? Sticks, I guess, but the one where you play as
Okay.
the goblin and you stab people.
Huh? I think I missed that one.
Also, Plague Tale, I guess. Plague Tale Innocence,
Okay.
which
yeah.
I liked less than most people, but it's okay. But again, once you get spotted in that game, you're done. You know?
I feel like
It's a
it
trip to the
seems
game
be
over
really
screen.
hard
Hmm?
to build strong AI that is actually in depth for a stealth game.
Absolutely.
When I think about like the behind the scenes, what you have to plan and build in terms of logic, and even just having your AI react to the different environments that you set up, it seems like it's really tricky.
It
So
it seems
like
expensive.
They maybe found
The
really
entire time
expensive.
I spent playing this game, I could not stop. Like, wow, this looks
Yeah.
very expensive.
Yeah, actually, that leads probably maybe to the next part of your review. I'm not sure, but the visuals were amazing. Probably the best looking game on the console right now.
Definitely.
Yeah. So what are the other aspects of the game that you wanted to review besides gameplay?
The exploration part of it, which is where I sort of have a little bit of problem with it, but I also think it nails certain aspects.
Exploration.
Yeah, because that's literally probably the big 3 pillars of this game. It's the combat, it's the exploration, and it's the story.
Okay, so what would you be like? What are the attributes of exploration that you're rating this game on in terms of
The meaningfulness, variety, and clarity and communication.
But on the design side?
On
just
the
like
design
where to
side,
go
yeah.
And what you want the player to be doing.
It's more like how well does this environment and the level design communicate to me what is optional, what will give me the benefit in
right.
exploring, and
Yeah.
what will I get out of it.
That's pretty subtle stuff. That seems like it's
hard.
It's
hard.
the sign of good design, but you don't always notice it.
It's hard to do it unless you, in a subtle way, unless you're Ubisoft and you use icons for everything, and then it's very
Or a
clear
giant color.
what is worth your while and what is not. This game doesn't do that very often. It has one. This isn't really a spoiler. They already talked about it, but there's the one big area early on in downtown Seattle which has a map, and you're exploring that, and it's pretty wide and open. It's the largest area they developed. That's the only one of those in the game, which is interesting. I thought there would be more. I'm not mad that it's the only one, because I also don't really like that sort of design in these kinds of games. It's a big open area, and there's a lot for you to explore, and there's sort of a non-linear path for you to progress the story. They give you like, okay, there's these 3 main areas that we have to check out. Let's go check them out. And then there's side areas that you can go into.
Right.
All those side areas are really interesting. They all have little interesting stories to play in. One of them is if you miss it, you miss one of the best parts one of the best parts of this game. Yeah, cuz it's missable, right? And there's a very cool sequence that has an awesome pop culture reference in it. That really warmed my heart, and it was a really lovely scene. And it's totally missable.
So, do they like gate the locations by like equipment, or is it kind of the Breath of the Wild strategy where they just drop you somewhere and you can go anywhere you would want to go.
That seems to be mostly the case. There was one area where I had to have a key from another place to actually go into it, and that was a side area. That was the side area that I was saying that had the really cool thing in it. I'm not sure how missable the other ones are.
We talked about this last time, that if they do this kind of like open area and then cinching it down to like a specific story point, is that what they did? All the stories that within that kind of open area was free flowing and could happen anywhere, and then once you hit a kind of story checkpoint, you go back to the main story. Is that how they set it up?
Yes and no. It's definitely remember that shape that I was talking about, like this?
Yeah, it opens up,
and then you can just go straight through from one side to the other one and then be done with it.
Yeah.
But there is more stuff to explore around that area. It's like that, but it's also the only area that does that. And you'll be exploring around the open area, and then you'll find a document and say like, oh, they say there was some useful loot in this bank. Let's go investigate this bank. And then they'll mark it on your map. And there's about 6 of those major locations, and a few minor stuff scattered around
and then
in between.
After that, it goes into like a more linear type of story path. Then
yes.
Okay. Did you like that? You say you like the linear side a little bit more though.
I like the linear side, and I like how they did the linear side of the stuff more. Like the open area felt very. I don't want to say it felt fake, but it felt the fact that it was the only area and it lasted me maybe about an hour and a half to do everything. It felt a little unnecessary. It was more
out of place, maybe.
Yeah, it seemed like it took a lot of time just to like balance all those variables that you could go in different orders, right? It didn't feel like it was
my
worthwhile.
theory when I hear about something like that. When you told me that, I keep thinking if in terms of game development, that first area maybe was the scope of something that they wanted to keep going with, but as deadlines started looming, I wonder if they started to narrow down, and at some point they made a cut and they said, here, we'll just leave the open area stuff for at least one section because we can finish that off, and then from the rest of it, we'll just take care of the important stuff, which is like the story and everything else.
It definitely feels that way because there are other parts of the game that open out in a way that you feel could also have used a map, but they don't do that. Yeah. And I think it's better for it. Because it still has side areas.
I really agree that, yeah.
It
I don't necessarily say that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
To decide to cut certain things, because you have to make those trade-offs in game development.
Because there's still side areas there that I think are very worthwhile. And they have interesting puzzles to get into them. And then you're rewarded. And this is the part where the rewards are meaningful. Because this game does something very, very smart. There are major upgrades, and they highlight them in yellow when you pick them up. And it's stuff
like weapon upgrades or something like that?
No, actual weapons.
Oh, okay.
Like all the new weapons that you get.
So there's no chance of you missing something that's really fun.
No, there is. But here's because they're in side areas, right? So stuff like a second holster to have 2 long guns or 2 small guns equipped at the same time. Ooh. They are in side areas, so you could miss those. But there are more than one of them in different side areas. And as soon as you collect one, it removes them from the other areas.
Does it replace them with something else, or does it just remove
No, because there's also other loot there, like medicine, like supplements, which you use to upgrade your character, tools, which you use to upgrade
that's smart, yeah.
your weapons, as well as documents.
There's like a pool?
Sorry?
So there's like a pool of upgrades they want you to get, and as you get one, they reduce that pool so that you always have you're always rewarded for an effort, even if you already have this upgrade, right? That's pretty smart. Actually.
Yes, but not in the way you're thinking. Imagine if there are 4 locations where I can get the long holster. I skip over it on the first one, but I find it on the second. They will remove it from the second ones. They won't replace it with anything, but they'll remove those second ones. But those areas still have the other normal rewards, right? There's tiers of rewards. There's these major rewards. Then there's the minor rewards, which is tools and supplements. And then there's story rewards, which is like notes and like additional backstory and stuff. Also, some of those areas just have additional dialogue that you can listen to, and they can comment on the world and stuff. And they are still cool areas to navigate. Cool. So that's what I really liked. What I didn't like, because obviously I can never be happy with everything.
Nothing's perfect in my opinion.
Yeah. They use the "this door is locked, I guess I'm gonna have to go another way around" trope a lot, a lot.
That's a little.
And,
Yeah,
and
that's a little
it's
silly.
it's fine because here's the thing: the locked door is a good way to tell your players that there is more to this area. You approach a locked door and it's very clearly lit, and you jiggle it, and there's another way around. There is no locked door in this game that I can think of at the top of my head that is not there because there's something behind it. So sorry, let me explain that better. There's no locked door that doesn't have something rewarding behind it.
Okay, so when you see a locked door, you know you really want to get in there.
Yes, because she'll do an animation, she'll jiggle it and say, "Guess I'm not going in this way."
Yeah.
And there's stuff behind it. She'll never jiggle a door if there's nothing behind it.
Did they gate a lot of story behind that kind of mechanic?
No. They gate a lot of story
it feels
around
like it's okay
encounters.
to do that. It feels like it's okay to do that because it's a very obvious game trope, and like you said, everyone knows what to expect when you see a locked door. But you can jiggle it, but you can't open it.
Yeah.
Like, everyone knows what to expect. So I don't mind them using that. But I would be annoyed if I kept running into storyline plot that revolves around this silly locked door idea.
Yeah. There are plots that involve locked or blocked passages, but it's usually because you have to solve a puzzle to get through them, which are really cool. It's stuff like, oh, I can't open this door, but there's this rope here. I'm gonna throw it through the skylight, and I'll walk on the other side of the building, and I'll climb on top of the building. Like that's more how they block stuff off in the story.
Yeah.
But these side areas are more distinctly like, this is a locked door, I can get around it by like going around, smashing a window, or finding another way around.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, they do make more interesting ways to get in. So this is where I can forgive them for it. There are some puzzles. There is this one very early on that is where you pick up the proximity mine. And in order to get into it, it's on the second floor of this balcony, and you see like the light hits it, and there's like things flapping in the breeze. Like it's very clear, like there's stuff here.
Jones scene where he's like shining the light onto the amulet.
Yeah, basically.
That's what I imagine.
Basically, and you're like, yeah, I want to get in there. And then you gotta go, and there's a dumpster on a curve, so you kind of gotta drag it off the curve, and you put it in there, and then you climb up onto the balcony and get it. Like it's not a locked door, and there's something really rewarding inside of it. So they do stuff like that to keep on your toes, so it's not that bad. But there's a lot of locked doors. There's a lot of locked doors, and that's fine. It's video games, but it's something that I couldn't help but notice. It's a very small complaint.
I've always found really strange in any game that has, that spouts itself as story driven or very, very cinematically story, is if you have something that's grindy inside the game, though, it feels really out of place.
Yes.
And
really
that's
what the open map was, because the entire time I was concerned, like, did I fill out this map completely? Did I do everything? Yeah. The only reason I knew that I had done everything was because I got the trophy for doing everything. If I hadn't gotten that, I would have spent so long just going around that map saying like, did I see everything? You kind of got
another game that really does that to me is Assassin's Creed. Is activating all those towers takes me completely out of whatever story line that I'm doing.
Yeah. So it's a checklist style of game development, and I really do applaud Ubisoft from moving away from that in Odyssey and Origins.
In some ways, it's brilliant in terms, if you look at it on the developer side, because they took a whole bunch of modular gameplay mechanics and they tried to multiply them together to get tons of content over the course of this massive map. Because otherwise, how do you populate this? No one besides Breath of the Wild has really done that open world gameplay where it felt all handcrafted.
Mm-hmm.
And so
seamless.
Assassin's Creed tried to do something similar. They had these massive maps, but populated with the same mechanics over and over and over again. And they probably felt that they had to do that. Maybe they had grander plans and they realized that that's impossible to really do that on a proper scope.
Well, they got there in the end, right? With like Odyssey, you go to those areas, and the way they solved that problem is that they made every single side objective tied to a story that was mostly genuinely interesting.
And do you know what I think the biggest revolution that enabled that was, and has nothing to do with game technology? I think it's the fact that companies have really embraced outsourcing, and there are specific massive outsourcing companies that can take care of large sections of your specific crafted custom game and to put content in. I mean, that's how Witcher 3 got most of their modeling content in. I believe they outsourced
Also
a
crunching
huge percentage.
every
Also crunching everybody, and then also crunching all of their outsourcers.
Quick side story:
they really
Cyberpunk
embrace it.
2077 got extended for
Delayed.
another like
No
November,
surprise.
and
Listen,
and I
I'm
felt
a
so
huge
bad for
fan.
everyone.
I'm a huge fan of CD Projekt Red, but Cyberpunk I'm a little suspicious. Okay, I'm not saying it's gonna be bad. I'm just a little suspicious. What is that other game? I'm trying to remember right now. Star Citizen. Have you heard of this game called Star Citizen?
I've heard of Star Citizen. Is it a game though?
It is a game. I believe I'm thinking of the right game.
Yeah,
I believe
no, you are. You
I
are.
think this is the game.
You are.
And this Kickstarter that's been in the process of being kickstarted for the last 4 years, and people are buying $1,000 ships for a game that doesn't exist yet. I'm not saying this is Cyberpunk. I'm just thinking that they are promising on something that's so advanced in terms of content, like we were talking about with Assassin's Creed, that it makes it hard for me to believe that they'll be able to properly fill that content.
Yeah, I
The
can't
stuff
say.
you've seen is only it could possibly be pixie dust gameplay. If that makes sense, it could be slightly exaggerated gameplay, and the gameplay we've seen is not particularly unique. I'm hopeful, but that does explain a lot to me because I think that they're probably behind schedule.
Who isn't these days though?
Yeah, that's true. Anyways, we got a bit of a tangent. My bad.
Yep.
Bad.
I just needed to bring that up.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the exploration part of it. Also to mention the artificiality of the story, though, this game, man, they
You're getting cheered up.
almost.
It's like you're...
No. It's we'll get there. But they do this very, 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 very gamey thing of whenever there is like a squeeze through to get you to another section, like, you know, they're unloading stuff and loading stuff in. I'm not sure if it's because they have to like load stuff, and so it has to take the squeeze through has to take longer. But every time you crawl or squeeze, something attacks you on the other end off screen. Like immediately, and then you're stuck in like a mash, right? I gotta press square to get the zombie, or like, oh no,
So you're telling me you think that they're hiding additional loading by having this fake attack on screen so that they can spend a little bit more time loading in the background?
Yeah, that's what I think, because it happens way too often. And it can't just be for tension, because
that's a game designer. I think that's a game designer nitpick. You're like, these guys, I know what you're doing. It's the same tricks I do.
Well, it's a very expensive trick when you think about it, because every single one of those scenes has to have an animation and a fail sequence and a success sequence, right?
So you just pile up that time. Is it faster to make these animations, or is it faster to optimize our game?
Oh, this game is pretty tightly optimized. When I look at this game and I see
it,
huh?
But it's also pushing it too.
It is, and that's the thing. Is this game runs at a 30 frames per second consistently? I didn't notice any drops whatsoever on my base PS4. I wasn't playing it on a Pro, and it still looks incredibly good.
I'm impressed that you can get something looking that realistic on a console.
Yeah.
The fidelity was very, very, very impressive. Very impressive. The sweat physics.
The sweat physics, the blood physics, the dynamic,
the muscles,
all of it.
The muscles? Oh my god. And you know exactly who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I won't say anything.
Yeah.
There's some specific muscles that are hard to miss.
I want to like say how positive I feel about some of that stuff, but I don't want to spoil anything. Because,
yeah.
but
I know what you mean.
But
I know exactly what you mean. Save it for the spoiler review.
Yeah.
What was the third criteria? You had 3 criteria. It was gameplay, exploration,
and story.
Okay, so we should get to the story.
We should get to the story and just wrap this up. I'm not gonna say
do this without spoiling anything, though.
It's good. Go play it.
That's good. I've heard some people complain about the story.
Do we want?
It's hard for me to get through any of those complaints without really leveraging it. But do you think that it is simply a matter of them misunderstanding it, or is there any kind of legitimacy in those kind of claims?
I'm gonna explain to you my experiences in talking to certain people about this game,
Right.
and then you tell me what you think.
Yeah, yeah.
First and foremost, I really enjoy the story. I think it's amazingly paced. I think it works incredibly well in everything that it goes for. I was surprised by it a lot about what it made me feel, how it made me relate to those characters, and how they characterized certain characters at the beginning and how they characterized them at the end, how they drew. I'm talking around so many things here. But,
I know.
But,
But
I'm gonna save that. I'm gonna save that for the spoiler cast. It does a lot.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it, and when I talk to people about this game, I finished it. I finished very quickly. So people that I was talking to then came to me afterwards. Everyone that I talked to, a total of 7 people, who have finished this game, are with me in saying, "This is incredible. This is so well put together. This is everything I just talked about in terms of the story." And like, yes, that is me being in my own echo chamber. These are 7 people that like I talked to. There was 2 of them that were from the Giant Bomb forum that Giant Bomb Discord that I was in,
Right.
and I never met them before, but they also felt very positive about it.
Right.
Everyone that I have talked to personally, not just seen on the internet, talked to personally, that have voiced extreme criticism about this game, have not played the game. They have only seen leaks, they have only read the story, or they have watched through the whole game, they say on YouTube. They did not like the game.
Suspect.
And this is something that I think is important to talk about.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think is really important to me, is that watching a game is not the same as playing a game.
Okay.
And there
What do you
are
mean?
certain exceptions to this, for sure. But I think in a game like The Last of Us, which is so much about embodying these characters, going on a journey with them, struggling through this challenging and difficult gameplay, experiencing that tension, those feelings and those sentiments, you're literally walking a mile in someone else's shoes. And you're spending 26 hours doing this with these characters. That is not the same as you passively sitting on your chair and watching something.
The experience is different.
The experience is different. Same way, you always talk about this when I did film study. They explained there's a difference between passively watching something and actively watching something. The same way as playing a game is not so much about pushing buttons and making stuff happen on screen. Same as like watching a movie is just sitting in your chair. There's a relationship you're having between the characters, the developer, and yourself while you're playing it. You feel tense when you're being chased by these enemies. You feel shock when something happens to a character that your character is really attached to. And the thing that I always draw back when I start talking about this is when you hear someone talk about a video game. I'm not going to tell you, "Oh, last night I was playing Last of Us and Ellie snuck around these bad guys and threw a Molotov and used a proximity mine to blow up a dog." That's not how people talk about video games. I snuck around those guys. I threw a Molotov. I blew up the dog with the bomb.
Oh.
Right? You become complicit in what's happening on the screen. You miss that sort of psychological effect by watching something. You have an extra degree of distance from what is occurring on screen, what is happening to the characters. And that is something that is so important to me in the medium of video games and what they can do that movies cannot.
Right. I see what you're saying. So it's kind of like if you just played the last boss of a game, it's not the same feeling as when you beat that boss after beating the rest of the game.
Yeah.
The time that you spent in it is a part of the experience of having so much fun.
It's the bonding spirit of it. It's because you're not going to tell me that you're watching 11 hours of a 26-hour game and you are engaged for all those 11 hours. You literally
yeah.
cannot be engaged with this game if you're playing it, because being engaged is a requirement to seeing it advance.
So I agree with you when you say that if you watch the game, you're not going to have the same kind of experience. But I wonder if all the people who have those bad critiques about the game are people who've just, watched it only. And not to say that I think that
I would love to have a
person-
conversation with someone that played
Yeah.
this game from end to end and hated it. I would love to have that conversation.
I'm sure you will.
I would love to have
Or
that
you might.
conversation. I have
But
not met
I-
anyone that did that yet.
Well, I mean, it could be that it's a bit of a conspiracy in terms of who is around your specific circles that would or would not like
Yeah,
it. But I
I'm
do
very
think
aware of that too.
any-
Right?
Well, I think that any popular media, especially things that have a lot of hype behind it, they tend to spike a lot of emotions, one way or the other. And when you first told me about The Last of Us 2, your take on it, and then I started seeing some of those bad comments. And regardless of whether those comments are valid or not, I think just like when Star Wars came out, just like when any Marvel movie comes out with super high expectations, people have the bar set in certain ways. Not even just straight up, is this movie better or worse than the last one? But they have certain expectations as to what the movie or game will be, and also what expectations as to what kind of experience they'll have. And I find that there's a lot of people who aren't quite correctly assessing whether they think the game or movie is good or bad, but I think that they are more talking about how off the mark it is than what they expect, and they might not even know it.
Yeah.
And I saw this a lot with, especially Star Wars, the latest set of movies, or any of the new movies, because there was also the previous the prequels and then the original series. That's two different sets of fan bases that have two vastly different experiences and expectations as to what a good Star Wars movie is going to be. And regardless of whether you think those movies are good or bad, talking about them was so toxic. It was so painfully annoying for me to talk to anyone, because it was either an echo chamber or a giant fight as to who's right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And when I see a huge game come out, especially a game that maybe, even if it is critically good, it might be dividing, and then that'll be enough for people to have really, really extreme viewpoints of the game one way or the other. What I always look for is actually the more, who has the least extremist point of view when I look at the reviews, because it's hard for me to it's hard for me to follow someone that particularly hates the game. I'm always also very conscious and skeptical of someone who completely loves the game.
Yeah.
And the perfect game is always thrown out like all the time. It doesn't mean anything anymore.
Yeah.
But I think there's got to be a part of that, especially with The Last of Us. And they took huge risk, which, for me, after I heard that spoiler, regardless of what the execution was in terms of whether they did it right or wrong, I was impressed, because it's a major gambit in terms of your character and your story.
Yeah,
and a lot of movies and a lot of franchises would not make this kind of gambit with their characters. So I was very impressed in terms of them just being able to take that chance.
Yeah.
But it's good. I knew it immediately. It was like, this is something that's going to piss people off.
Yep. Even Neil Druckmann said, like, he thinks some people will absolutely not like this game, and I think
Is that the voice? Is that the game? Sorry,
he's the game director.
Oh, okay,
He's the one that you will see most in interviews talking about the game and what it is.
Yeah.
And the part about that, though, is you are supposed to hate that decision they made. You are supposed to feel that in yourself. And while you're playing the game, you're supposed to resent that they had the audacity to do this to you.
But history has never been able. Like, history has proven that we've never been able to separate those two.
I know.
Like, just look at Sherlock Holmes, the most famous character death that was taken back.
Oh,
in,
yeah,
I would say,
yeah,
modern
yeah.
century. And for those unfamiliar, the original author, which is completely missed my head right now.
Oh, God.
Wrote the first Sherlock. Yeah. Wrote the first Sherlock novel, and then wrote the second one in which Sherlock essentially dies by jumping off
These
a
are right novels. They
waterfall.
came in like the stories came in printed in newspapers.
Yeah, sorry, you're right. They were print media stories.
Yeah, it was like the 14th story was it ended at the Reichenbach, spoilers for Sherlock Holmes. It ends at Reichenbach Falls, where he goes into a waterfall with his arch nemesis Professor Moriarty.
So they essentially kill him off, and then the crowd goes wild and starts harassing the author until
Who just wanted to write other stories. He just wanted to write stories. Sherlock Holmes was too popular. He just wanted to write different stories.
So it makes complete sense that some people might just be pissed off with the decision and mixing their emotions in terms of what they felt with the story with what they felt with the characters. Which I always think about movies in terms and games now as well as they become more and more cinematic and more inclined towards storytelling, is that you're not looking necessarily not you as our audience or anyone who's listening to this, you yourself might be looking for a specific experience with the movie, one that you had before or you've enjoyed before. But there's a lot of people who like to explore aspects that don't necessarily feel good, or it's like having a bitterness taste in your meal. Some people might not like it, but there are certain people who like to explore that complexity in depth.
Yeah.
And that's what good storytellers do. They have to take a chance and some stories are not going to leave you feeling good. I never want to watch Schindler's List again. I'm super glad I watched it the first time, but I'm not going to watch it again. But it's an incredible movie for the type of emotions that it's able to make you feel.
Mm-hmm. And I think this game, it pays off all its gambles really well. And that's what I feel it's worthwhile. And if you think about Last of Us as a franchise, what it means to do. I remember back in 2013 when the first game came out, and that game, I'm going to spoil the ending of Last of Us Part 1, FYI. It ends with Joel deciding to forsake humanity for the sake of Ellie. Possibly. They were going to do a surgery on Ellie that might have given a vaccine to save humanity, and he decided to kill everyone instead and save her. And then it ends with him telling a lie to Ellie, and the last shot of her is like, you don't know if she believes or not. She just says, okay. And it is, I got chills down my spine just recreating that. Yep. And that was extremely challenging. People were confronted with this character they were playing the whole time who never was a hero type character. He was just the character you happen to play as, and you're playing through his story. People always say, like, I don't like that I didn't have a choice to not save Ellie, and like, this is not the game that I wanted to play. People were upset, and like the entire time is like, this is not the story about you, the player. This is a story about Joel. And if you don't agree and you don't agree with these decisions, why did you follow this character for the past 17 hours?
Well, I feel that's something that the game industry has struggled with in terms
player
of
ownership, right?
Deciding do you want to tell a story of a character, or do you want people to feel like they're the person playing, like that speech you gave about I doing this, I doing that, etc., etc. What I kind of think is that the whole idea of having a faceless character is marketing speak. I think that's kind of forced upon by an outsider's view of gaming, of playing games. Because like you said, just because you're playing Ellie, you're not a however old young little girl in the
19.
middle of an apocalypse. Exactly. But you're still saying I, because that's the part of the game that is inherent in terms of when you play games.
That's the role you're playing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're an
role
actor.
playing, essentially. So whenever I hear people say that whenever I see a game that has a non-talking character, I always think that the person that made that decision was the marketing person and said that, listen, we're not going to sell as many copies if so and so kid can't pretend that they're this person here, which in my head is completely ridiculous because how many times do you pretend to be the Power Ranger or whatever, right?
You remember Spec
so
Ops
yeah.
The Line? Why are you here?
Oh yeah, yeah,
You're here
exactly.
because
Like
you want to be
having a
something you're
specific-
not. A hero.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
You're not a hero in The
Um,
Last of Us. You never were. None of those characters are heroes.
Yeah, you're just following along and seeing what,
You're,
even if it just
you're
makes you
walking in
feel
their
what would
shoes.
you do in this decision. That person that made that comment to you that said, "I was upset that I couldn't make that decision." People just need to realize that that in itself is success for that game. If you realize that you wouldn't want to do this, that's fine. That's great. Now you know maybe partially what you would want yourself to do in this kind of situation, and then also know that maybe someone else wouldn't in terms of
Yeah. And
making the wrong decision, right?
that's the thing that I feel with these games that do their story extremely well, is that even though the characters are making decisions that I strongly disagree with, that I don't think are healthy and good decisions,
Yeah.
I would have been dead in this world a long time ago too, right? This is not
Right.
this is The Last of Us.
Yeah, we're
this is the
all
part of
dead.
humanity that I got left behind.
Yeah.
And I can still relate to these characters, right? I've thankfully never gone through like such horrible like apocalyptic mess that they go through. But when Joel chooses to save Ellie, I get it. Right? I get it. I spent 17 hours with him. Like I was there in his moments when he was grieving the loss of his daughter. I was there with him when he was like despondent and like keeping everyone at distance. I was there when Ellie saved his life. I was there when Ellie said, "Everyone dies except me. You're all I have left." I get it. You know? It's wrong.
Yeah.
This he's not a good man.
Yeah.
But I
yeah,
get it.
yeah.
And that's the power of the storytelling. I walked 17 hours in Joel's shoes. I can see what made him tick. I saw him why he makes his decisions because the story is very powerful. That's the same in Last of Us Part 2, ratchet up to like 10. It does it even better, I feel.
So there's this one comment that I read that I feel like it might have some weight, but I can't quite tell because I didn't play the game like you for example.
Yeah, you didn't.
And it was that when let me try to remember the exact example this person was using because it was a really good one. It was for BoJack Horseman. Have you ever watched this television show?
Yes.
So it has the season endings. The writer was talking about season endings and having too many depressing season endings. Not only doesn't work, it becomes less and less effective as you have more and more of them because people are drowned in the same emotion and they're kind of expecting it. So do you feel that having such a darker tone in the second one drowns the darkness of what happened in the very big, like, I believe the comment was the darkness that happens right away makes the rest of it feel not as significant because it happens so swiftly right away.
No, I disagree completely. Because the way this game is set up, it does some ingenious things with its pacing that the brightest moments of this game, stuff that is so beautiful that it made me cry. Not because I was sad or anything, but because it was so wholesome and pure.
Yeah.
Those are in the middle of the game. And when you base it on the context of what had happened previously, and you sort of see what was lost,
Right.
it becomes that much more valuable to you. And it keeps you going, right?
Right.
This,
Interesting.
as much as people keep saying like this game is a misery simulator, it is not. There are some of the most poignant and beautiful and heartwarming scenes that I have seen in any video game happen in this game. In this game that is just drowning in bad actions and just hate and sorrow and poor decisions, and it takes things to a place where you won't finish this game and you'll feel happy. You'll feel relief, and you'll feel this sort of... You'll be like Ellie at the end of the game, and you'll be like, okay.
Shook?
You'll be shook. You'll think about what you went through. You'll wonder if any of it was worth it. And you'll grasp onto something that you saw in the middle of that game and you saw at the end, and you'll say, yeah, I got something from this. The people that are the most angry about the thing that happens in this game are the people that would benefit the most from playing through it. Because where it takes...
you have to have a conversation with someone who's played through it and dislikes it first.
I would like you, because...
It's hard to say who this person is yet, because we don't know.
It's a generic you, right? It's people that go and read plot outlines, and then they start writing death threats to
I think that's a little
Neil,
too
right?
easily dismissive of the critique.
That's
I would
fair.
say that, not saying that you're necessarily wrong or right, but it's hard to say, because it could be that they have something that we just don't know about, right? That maybe is a legitimate.
Although for the people that are out there, and when you're writing death threats and you're threatening developers on the street, stop
Don't do
that.
Yeah, don't do that.
What are
That's
you doing?
unnecessary, guys.
What are you trying to prove? Just don't. Also, play through this game, because it will address your issue. This game is made for you.
Let's have any last words about Last of Us Part 2, because if you want to stay on schedule, we'll want to move on to our next few topics. Do you have anything else to say? I think it sounds like you are a big proponent of The Last of Us 2.
Yep.
Were they a success for you, would say?
It was a success for me, I would say. I want to just do a quick shot at the people that will always be commenting on this game, saying that Naughty Dog are a bunch of social justice warriors. I just want to do one quick thing. If you have a problem in this game about the fact that Ellie calls someone a bigot because they use anti-LGBTQ slander against her, there's nothing wrong with this game, but there's something wrong here, and it has nothing to do with the game. Gonna leave with that.
I hadn't seen that article, but that sounds a little ridiculous.
It's also really good scene. It's like a guy just apologizes to her. It picks up and saying, like, I'm sorry about what I told you the other day. I made you some sandwiches. It's like, I don't want your damn sandwiches. It's like, here, you can have your bigot sandwiches. And it's great. It's at once both empowering and like firmly says, like, no, this sort of behavior is not acceptable.
Yeah,
and it also shows how unwilling Ellie is to forgive stuff, which plays into the whole premise of the thing.
Yeah.
But seriously, guys, grow up. Grow up. Stop.
Listen, I'm sure it's a small portion. Let's not focus our attention on the negative people.
It upsets me.
People.
It upsets me, and
I
think this game has really excellent representation, and it's doing the right thing, and it handles things extremely well, and you should play it.
Nice.
Let's move on to your thing.
Yes. My thing next up, as you guys can see, is Melee, Smash Brothers Melee. We have a little combo video from various tournaments that we can put up while we talk. It's so interesting to me to talk about a 19-year-old game, because Melee came out in 2001, that's been innovating for the last years and years and years, despite the fact that it's had almost no support from Nintendo. In fact, it had anti-support from Nintendo for the longest time, and certain projects, which will not allow to be named anymore, were taken off.
Really?
Yeah, there were certain modifications made for the community to a game that the community has pretty much collectively decided that might be the worst game in the Smash Bros. Series, Brawl, and made it a very, very much more interesting, different gameplay. But Nintendo axed that in terms of being able to stream anything.
Are you kidding
So
me?
now
Really?
it's essentially Voldemort
I
of
love
games.
that version of the game.
Yeah, that version is awesome. It's back though. It's back. So it's
Oh,
under a
okay.
different guise. So if anyone wants to look for it, you just Google it. Anyways, what I want to talk about today though is that yesterday, I had no idea either, but they dropped a massive bomb on the Melee community. They talked about it, they touted it as the Melee revolution, and I really think that they are not exaggerating. So what it is, it's called Project Slippy, or just Slippy, and everyone's been talking about it as Rollback Melee. Now, you might be really interested in this because the biggest thing that has changed about it is something that I believe a lot of fighting games will be able to relate to, and it's the netcode. This person named Fizz, quit his job for 6 months to work on this code for the community. I don't know if he had any inkling of what he'd be doing in terms of how successful it would be, but he took a massive gambit for this community, and dude, massive props to him. If you're out there, donate to his page. But he reworked the network code of Melee on emulator to be able to have massive amounts of reduction in terms of how laggy the game feels.
Does it have rollback?
So, yeah, it has rollback. Are you familiar with rollback netcode?
Yeah.
And how that works?
Do you want to explain
it? So you kind of know the basics is essentially, instead of missing inputs because the computer is waiting for the lag to resolve itself, the clients on each side of the game continue to run on as if they put the inputs in, and through some wizardry that you might know but I don't, on the back end, it resolves it at the point that the person presses the input. So what that means is that instead of missing an input in a game that's very, very input precise like Smash Brothers Melee, you might be missing a jump that will cause you to die. It will instead, at most, cause a small like visual artifact where it then pops your character into the correct position, as if you didn't miss that, or it didn't not miss, or it didn't drop that particular input, and then resolve it on the back end. So what that's enabled for Melee is that, I guess, the bit of the back history of Melee is important to understand. Melee is played only on a GameCube, and before required a CRT TV to get proper high level of latency, or low levels of latency. And recently, it's slowly come online through emulators, and that's really revived the scene in terms of being able to play and be able to connect with your friends and grow the community. But even then, it had its huge limitations. A temporary midpoint was put in place by this website called Anther's Ladder, which is essentially a ladder system where you can manually connect your emulators together. It was a bit of a process. You had to do this back and forth and coding and logging in and sharing codes and challenging, etc. But this person has made all of that into the back end of the emulator. So now you can just run the game. You can pick your character and go directly into internet matchmaking with this significantly less laggy netcode. And so now if you look at Twitch, for example, the numbers of Melee have just slowly grown. And Melee is one of those ones that has almost no one watching until tournaments, and then it spikes up to like 40 to 60K, right? But now suddenly people are getting back into it because it becomes so much easier to stream and to play casually. You can just jump into a game right away. Before it was such a bad process. And I guess part of it is because you've been in fighting game communities. Let's be honest, fighting game communities is full of a lot of testosterone and jerks and kind of maybe people with a little too much swagger that get on your nerves. And all of that was translated through this online matchmaking system that was used before. I mean, I loved Anther's Ladder to be able to just connect and play with people, but there was just so much toxicity that would arise from chatting and setting up the game in general that it made it such a bad experience to play. But now you jump straight into the game. You have to do none of that kind of setting up process, and it's really easy to jump in and out of the game. But what's been really, really nice for the community is that it's enabled people to play across a way larger region of space, like being able to play with Europe, for example, or being able to play with Japan, especially during COVID right now, where all the online tournaments have been a bit snuffed by this lag that they've been getting the entire time, and no one really knows how to resolve it. But then suddenly, like a miracle out of nowhere, Fitz drops this Project Slippy down with rollback netplay, and then suddenly everyone's playing it again. I think I'm watching people stream, and this is the first time that we've attracted people from the Ultimate community, who's been starving since COVID. From what I hear, I don't play Ultimate myself, but the community is starving because their online does not have rollback, and the lag is quite terrible for their Ultimate community. Can you confirm this? Do you know about this
It's
at all?
it's not great. It's also everyone is on wireless because it doesn't come with a wired adapter. I had to buy my
That's
own.
right. That's right.
So
Oh my goodness.
me playing with my friends is it's fine. It's fine. It's
It's
not
frustrating. Fine. You can imagine playing
But
for a tournament where rankings are online.
playing online. You know, some people are using their like mother's Wi-Fi, and it's not great.
Yeah. So it's very fascinating to see the Ultimate community start to jump in and start to learn the specific melee tech. The game is different enough that they're very different games. You can practically call them Counter-Strike and Valorant. They're similar base, but then the execution is much different in terms of what it ends up on the table. So I'm very
Did
excited.
they change the balance at all?
No, they kept the game exactly the same. This is another fascinating thing for me because I followed the Melee community for a while. I dropped off after a while, and then I got back into it when I was older. Is that the game has never been patched. There was one other version for Europe that has slightly different things, so maybe that was Nintendo intending to patch something on one of the different versions before they released it. But ever since the game came out, there's been no one available to patch it because obviously the hardware is kind of obsolete now, and no one has optic readers to be able to mimic it. But that has led to such an evolution in the meta. If you were able to chart, let's say even just the top tier characters throughout the years, it's jumped so many times, and it's gone through so many periods where people think there's no way it's going to change because this character is so dominant. And then it goes through another era where another character is extremely dominant. And then it goes through another era where maybe a new player is playing the character in a completely different way that makes it now super super dominant.
But is
And so
anyone like? Sorry, go ahead.
no, keep going. Yeah, what were you gonna say?
Is anyone ever gonna play Ganondorf though?
There have been tons of Ganondorf players.
Okay.
And there are some legit ones. He's a bit of a hype character in terms of the lower tier characters.
Okay.
Or mid tier characters. It's just a matter of there are certain Ganon suffers from some extremely harsh matchups, which is why the top tiers are top tiers. Sometimes it's just because they're able to have really one-sided matchups against certain other characters, and then only other top tier characters can deal with this other character.
Okay.
Sheik is, for example, on the higher levels, a character in Melee that stomps a lot of lower tier characters, like really, really badly. But against the high tier characters, it's quite an even matchup for most of her matchups, for example.
How many?
Anyway,
Do you feel
yeah.
that if they patched Melee, right? And they made more characters viable, and they got rid of some of the more exploity exploits, shall we say?
Yeah.
Would that make for a better game?
I actually disagree. It's hard to say without knowing exactly what kind of changes they made. But a lot of the moves that people may at the beginning would have really pointed to as exploity and cheap have become fundamentals into the game. And at one point in the meta, they were the broken meta. But then once people learned how to play around it, they realized the game was advanced enough so that you could work around this meta. For example, one of the most interesting dynamics is everyone talks about how Fox is the best character in Melee, and most people will undoubtedly agree with you that Fox is probably the best overall character. But there's a very interesting dynamic that develops in that because there's so many Fox characters, and because every character that you want to play, if you're competitive, needs to deal with this Fox character, that everyone actually has a playbook against Fox. So if you're a Fox player, you have to be that much better because everyone's ready for your specific character. Whereas you can play some lesser known tier characters, and then the matchup knowledge is so deep that you might have an advantage because they haven't prepared for this level of the Peach Sheik matchup, for example. But everyone has a Fox matchup. Everyone has pretty much a matchup for most of the top tier characters. So there's always that dynamic, and that's what makes it interesting is that there's a certain dynamic in terms of how to beat this top tier character, and then once someone beats that top tier character, say with Marth or something, that becomes the new top tier character that everyone's trying to figure out how to beat. Because the roadmap in terms of how to beat certain gameplay styles has been already paved. It's just theoretical execution of that roadmap after that. And we wouldn't have been able to see any of that if they, for example, patched some of the techniques such as shining and being able to do moves out of shine, or even wave dashing, which is you can kind of clearly see the Nintendo really wanted to patch that after they realized it was it was there. Because in Brawl they added the tripping mechanic where you just randomly trip, so it was kind of a slap in your face saying, "Don't move around so much, you idiot." um, but that mechanic has become so integral, and it's kind of what makes the game so great. I'm not saying the game could be better. There might be better if you're able to, like you said, maybe make some of the low tier characters more viable. I have to admit that the high tier list is roughly 30 to 40% of the cast, so it's not the highest as Ultimate, for example, where it's a much more even distribution. But I also realized with Ultimate and with Project Plus is that if you have a ton of characters that are viable, it makes playing the game a bit frustrating because too many characters have too many unique niches that you have to learn about. Whereas I like Melee because even though it has a small character roster, each of those rosters' depth in terms of combating each other is quite deep. So there's a lot of levels to learn just from these simple pieces that they're putting on the board. So yeah, the rollback is such a big deal now because it's going to be really interesting to see proper lagless tournaments. Everyone who's played it has had the same kind of sentiment in that at its worst, it's playable, and at its best, it's almost as good as being at a LAN, which is really, really, really impressive. And from my understanding, the fact that some guy did this in 6 months by himself, um, did all the net coding himself is so impressive. And it just came out of nowhere, so I'm very hyped to be talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you played other fighting games? Did you ever have any? Did you see anyone else resolve the net code issues?
Well, a lot of fighting games generally that are made in the industry use GGPO, which is
What is that?
A GGPO is a
You're online?
rollback. I believe it's an open source rollback solution.
Right.
And it is commonly used to resolve that sort of lag issue. This is the thing that Capcom was notoriously known for not doing for Street Fighter V.
Yep.
I think they did it now,
but the perfect example. Sorry, finish what you're saying. Finish what you're saying. Sorry.
I think they added it in now after someone did it for them unofficially, and then said, "I did this in the afternoon" or something reductive like that. Don't quote me on that story. I remember when it finally happened, people were like, "Come on, what are you doing?" I'm like, and I think they did it now. I never was too much of a big Street Fighter guy. I was a big Mortal Kombat guy.
Right.
But
still,
that game has
you knew
lag
what happened
issues, for sure.
to 4 and 5, right? Like everyone had issues with 5, especially with the online play being quite difficult to practice and really have a stable connection with.
Yeah, and that's
another reason. Sorry, I was gonna say that's another reason why I kind of think it's amazing that Melee didn't get patched. It's not just because it didn't get patched; it's that it survived all of its predecessors. Very few games can survive the next game coming out and still be in tournament. I don't know if there's Street Fighter 4 tournaments still going on right now.
Yeah, people still play Street Fighter 4 for sure.
Yeah, right. So the community is probably still there because it's a strong game. But I love the fact that the Melee community has kind of lived through so many generations, and they're still crawling back.
It's weird, and I don't get it personally.
I think it's one of those things that it's not going to be apparent unless you're playing the game. Unless you decide to jump into it as like a multiplayer competitive game, you'll be able to kind of see the depth. But from the surface, it looks similar-ish to Ultimate. It looks like a faster version of Ultimate, maybe like an uglier version for some people, although I love it.
Mm-hmm.
But once you understand the movement and what it allows you to do, this game is what I've always called a sandbox fighter because it's a physics sandbox game that you're essentially playing. You're playing with Nintendo's physics engine, and they happen to have the perfect settings in Melee to make it both paced but fair and exciting.
but what you need to do to your hands, what you
Yeah,
need to do
it's-
to your
you're moving
hands
fast.
to make
You're
it
moving
happen.
fast. There's been some notorious players who have had carpal tunnel destroy their career, and then they've come back with the box. They call it the box, but it's essentially a joystick setup without a joystick. It's using the GameCube controller transformed into a fight stick, but with buttons for the left hand instead of a joystick. Carpal tunnel. And you gotta, even if I understand, it looks weird on an outsider's perspective, but just to see how much people have put into a game that's supposed to be dead has got to tell you there's something to this game. It's got to tell you there's something to this game. I'm saying
People aren't going to see
you
this
can
in the
take a look-
audio, but I'm giving the biggest of shrugs.
I guess
like,
you're
look,
not.
look,
I guess you don't really
you-
care as much, but that's fine.
you like the game. You like the game, and there's a big community around it, and I'm glad people are enjoying it. I wish they weren't destroying their bodies to do it.
I mean, they're not destroying their bodies. It's like anything that will have carpal tunnel. If
That's
you
true.
play
We
a
all
shooter
have
game,
we'll
there's gonna
all
be
have carpal tunnel eventually.
Yeah. I mean, I understand that this is a game that's like not for everyone. I'm not saying it's for everyone. That's kind of my same statement about games like Valorant, is that people come into it and they expect to get it the way that they get, I don't know, a more mainstream game. Like we talk about Last of Us making decisions that are risky, but if I'm talking about in a movie sense, it hasn't taken that many risks. It's taking a lot of risks for a game, right? So like it's still very much on the mainstream. So that's not what Melee is. Melee at one point was a mainstream game, but now it's like, Ultimate's the mainstream game.
What?
But that's not to say that you should look at these games that have had long histories of competitive scenes that don't die, for a reason, because they exist because their gameplay is really, really solid. You look at any of the games that have kept going since their
But those games have
10-year
been
inceptions
updated.
ago. That's the amazing part. The game, I would find that even more impressive that you don't update it, that it's still competitive. It means that they've got so much right at the very beginning, and I think that they got pretty lucky with Melee in a lot of ways, because Nintendo tried to reverse a lot of their decisions later on with gameplay mechanics. But you look at a game like Dota or Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike hasn't changed its core mechanic almost at all. Their biggest change has come recently with the change to the FMAMS. That was kind of annoying a bunch of players, but like that was a really small change in terms of there's no new guns added or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's a lot of depth to games that have like massive staying powers, and this game's been here for like 19 years. So
Yeah.
I think it's worth taking a look at in terms of a competitive
I
game.
believe it. I believe it. I've seen it. I've gotten my butt kicked in Melee. I have seen the guides and tutorials that teach you how to do the maneuvers and stuff. I have tried doing them myself, and I said, I'm good.
It's great. That's great. We'll see you
good.
guys in Ultimate, but we'll be playing Melee.
That's fine. I'm amazed that this man dedicated 6 months of his jobless life to do this. That is such a big
there's a lot of
risk.
people that love this game. You talk about people who love games the way you do. I mean, that like you love The Last of Us. There are a lot of people that love this game that much.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah, there's like for a reason. It's very high.
See, this is the thing. These people jumping out of their seats, smiling, laughing, having a good time. I like this. That's why I can never not respect the enjoyment that people get out of it. I don't like the toxicity. I know that's a big problem with Melee. But when you see this positivity, it's nice. It's hard not to feel good about it.
Yeah. Okay, we can talk about move on to the next topic, Ready Player One now.
Do we have to?
So this is what I would say this is what I would tell the people that you say don't like The Last of Us, or the people that say they don't like Last of Us, is that you should be able to find the good stuff in stuff that you don't like either. And even if people don't like The Last of Us, for example, they should be able to see the quality work that was put into the game, because that stuff is more undeniable. the artwork and the design, the character design, and the rendering, all of that is kind of undeniable. I'm not gonna say that uh, Ready Player One has that level of polish, but I think there's a lot of stuff that's kind of funny with it, and funny in a way that I love bad movies, and so movies that take themselves seriously but miss the mark for whatever reason have a soft part in my heart because it just I like the fact that people made mistakes and they're just like silly about it. And some of my favorite movies of all time are so cheesy. Like if you've ever watched a 1990s Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, you'll know exactly what I'm
You
talking
shut up.
about.
Those are good movies.
One
You take that back
liners,
right now.
they're cheesy as hell, but they're awesome and they're super fun. And I think that there's a little bit of fun in Ready Player One that might be able to
Blow off some steam,
whip out here.
Bennett.
All right, so this might be a little bit tricky in terms of how we do this because I want to talk about specific scenes in this movie and let's see what you guys feel about it. So I went through this movie trying to find what games they showed. They call it like it's Ready Player One, and you think of it as like a movie about games, but there's actually not that many games that they play in this take of it. First off, it was a novel before the movie was made. Did you read the novel, for example?
Nope.
By the way,
I just watched
it's
the
just
movie.
fine. The movie was kind of loosely based around it, but in the same way that the movie threw every single nostalgic example at you, the book does something very similar,
Yeah.
but with different levels of nostalgia. I would say the story in the book is a bit tighter. This the story of the movie is pretty terrible. Let's be honest here. It's essentially about our character named Wade, and he's like this third world country kid that can't afford to like have a backyard, but for some reason he has this fully functional multi-directional VR headset. So I guess like in the priorities in the third world countries in the future, it's gonna be like food, water, and VR, which is a bit of the premise that they set up for this movie.
Even though all the
Um,
actors are incredibly attractive.
I know their skin is way
Flawless.
too well maintained. Like
They
go
don't
to
look like
Vietnam, my
they
country.
don't, their hands
You'll
don't look
see-
like they ever worked for their bread.
You'll see what UV damage does. So the very first game that they play is this racing game. Do you remember? You've obviously watched this movie. I think I've asked you already, right? Yeah.
I watched it. I
Um,
watched it with you.
Oh yeah, that's right. So our company took us on because we worked at a virtual reality company. They're like, you gotta watch this virtual reality movie. It's gonna be great, right? And I'm pretty sure we both heard the same groans throughout this movie because there are certain points where I think some of our coworkers couldn't stand being in the theater for certain scenes and they just left.
The one that got me is was when he got the full bodysuit, and then he was like dancing with the girl, and
so
she's just
awkward.
rubbing
The
all over
dancing,
him,
oh my
and he's like,
goodness.
ooh, and
You'll
like,
notice that I took no screenshots of that specific dancing scene because I couldn't watch it. I had to put my head down during that scene as well.
did you want
Yeah.
me to put up any shots?
Yeah, I'm just grabbing one for you right now, trying to find the one that's like most relevant, I guess. Here we go. This is just what the scene looks like. So, first off, this game itself. Let me send this to you real quick. Where is my window? Okay,
I
so
scrolled down
the
and I saw
premise
that
of the
bird.
first game inside Ready Player One is just this massive race to the end, and the winner will get this special artifact, and the whole movie is based around this end game, this meta gaming of the Oasis, the world that they're in, that the creator put in 3 keys to unlock, I guess, the source code of the Oasis or something that will let you have full control over this entity that's kept going after the creator died. And so the idea is that this race is kind of a free for all, and whoever gets to the finish line will win. Now, if you watch the movie, this race is actually a ton of fun. They have all sorts of different cars, and they throw in every nostalgic car you can think of. Like, you
DeLorean.
can see, for example, here, it's Kaneda's bike from Akira, and then there's a DeLorean in there, and then there's a Batmobile. And then you're
Whoa.
fighting King Kong at one point. Whoa, we're full screen.
Whoa, wait, hold on. There we go.
There we go. So I actually think that would be so much fun in a regular racing game. Like we were talking about this other game. What was the game that we saw in the
This is
the
ultra
PS5
widescreen. I just realized.
Yeah, right. I think it's prime right now for some sort of destruction-based racing game with high stakes at the end. That would be tons of fun, I think. What do you think? Do you think this would be a game that you would play, just like a straight-up racing game where things
You
are
mean like
crashing into
Destruction All-Stars teased at the PlayStation 5 conference, where you can ride the cars and destroy each other and jump out and go to
This is where like a bag of money comes in off screen and you take it.
Yeah.
Except that game was a
Did
an
it check
arena
cash?
game.
The
This
check
is like-
cashed,
this
right?
is
Yeah,
like-
okay.
What was that? This is like Road Rage from the Super Nintendo era when you're
On the bikes and
on
then you have
bicycle-
to like hit each other off of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Did you ever play Onrush?
No, I haven't played Onrush.
I mentioned this briefly in our podcast. We were talking about the PlayStation 5 screen. Onrush is exactly that. Onrush is it's kind of like MotorStorm, where you have the big honking like big rig trucks, and then you also have the maneuverable little bikes that just go. But it's a team-based game that is not a race. It's objective-based. Some of them are it's King of the Hill, and you're going around the track, right? It's always circular, but there's no laps, and you're always keeping up with like the pack. Everyone's kept close within each other, and there'll be areas where like you have to stay in the circle with your team, and the other team is just trying to get you out of there. It's like King of the Hill.
Arena like car battler.
Yeah, but you're always going around this track, and then there's a bunch of like AI-driven cars. So some of them is like you gotta take out the AIs, and then it gets you boosts, and you use boosts to like ram the AI off the opposing team off the circle, so you can get points. It was a really cool idea. It didn't sell at all, and that's a goddamn shame.
Sounds like it could be this game, like later.
It could be, right? But this is more of an actual race.
Yeah, but I found what was so funny about this movie was that so the spoiler for this movie is that the ultimate like solution for this whole race was just to go backwards at the beginning, and then that was like some massive secret that no one figured out except our main character.
Like you figured out the clue.
If you play any racing game ever, even by accident, I think half the population is gonna go backwards at the beginning just to mess around and see what happens. And you're trying to tell me that this game, no one's done that before? No one pressed backwards for a little bit?
Do you notice how you can't really do that in like modern racing games anymore? They won't let you go backwards.
Really? Did they like flip their car over or something?
Yeah, they just
What did they
respawn
do?
you.
I guess it's to to prevent trolling, because I
Online,
remember
yeah.
especially in the arcade there was this game called Daytona USA that I would, play a
Daytona!
lot. Daytona. And then if you were losing, like sometimes someone just messes you up at the beginning and you mess up your drift. There was always someone that decided to just forgo their quarters and go backwards on the course, and he's just trying to snipe you out of your race the entire time.
Yeah.
That's probably why they put that. Yeah, so that was the first game that I saw on Ready Player One. Kind of okay. For the most part, I was a little disappointed in the amount of games they had. This is a huge fault of the movie. They had way too much boring romance and weird revolutionary stuff. When I watched this movie again, I would say the middle, from the beginning of the movie where they had this little race scene here, and then for probably a whole hour, it's nothing but them in the real world being their boring, awkward, cringy selves.
Awkward,
And
cringy,
then-
beautiful selves.
Way too beautiful. Which, by the way, the funniest moment to me was when this girl that he's been swooning over, like, oh my god, in the cringiest neckbeard way possible, turns out to be this gorgeous woman, and she's
He
like,
stalks
I'm
her!"
hideous. And she has a small blemish on her eye. There's not even a raise. They couldn't even put some makeup on to make it look a little deformed, like she was actually burnt or something. No, she's this beautiful woman that's barely had discoloration. Like, and what's even worse is the message they accidentally sent. I'm sure that they were trying to send a message that, you know, everyone's beautiful. What it matters what you look like in the inside. But it really just says, hey, if you look even this bad as this good, amazing, beautiful girl looks, that you don't look as good as her, then you're even worse. Oh, it's so cringy.
Yep.
I think I
not
heard
great.
one of our team coworkers in that moment leave. That was one of the head leaving situations in the theater.
That's when they
So
tapped
many.
out.
So many, so many. So that's part of why I like. I don't like this movie. I think it's a terrible movie, but I like talking about it because it's fun and how stupidly bad and like and tone deaf it was. And tone deaf it was. So the second game I wanted to talk about here. Hold on, look through my notes. Oh, okay,
Is
okay.
this the correct
So
thing? Nope, that's not the correct one.
let me send you the
I'm trying really
next
hard to
little
work with
video.
you on the fly right now.
It's okay, it's okay, it's okay if it takes a little bit of time or if it doesn't work out super well. I'll send you the screenshot of this guy here,
Okay.
and I want you to tell me if you remember who this person was in the movie, and I want you to tell me if you know why I'm gonna make fun of this particular
Oh no.
set of characters.
You're asking a lot from me right now.
Oh, you don't. I don't expect you to know exactly who it is. He's the librarian.
I haven't put it up yet.
Okay. Well, just to preface for anyone who's listening, this is the librarian or lore keeper in the movie that talks to Wade and tells him a crucial hint to how to solve this going backwards puzzle. There we go. So what I found hilarious about this character in terms of how bad everything about this character and the things that happened around him was first off, the clue that gets told in this scene is so terribly obvious that I don't believe that they set up this lore about how someone couldn't solve this clue for 24 years because they're looking through the history of the creator, this character named Halliday, and then at the end he literally says, "Don't you wish you could just go backwards sometimes? Backwards, pedal to the metal. Wouldn't that be fun?" And no one understood this clue. No one put this together with the racing game that's the first step in the goddamn clue scenario to find the ultimate reward in this stupid movie.
It's like a Battlefield developer tweeting out like one of the Easter eggs, like, there's 4 bells in this map, it's 4 to the power of 8 square root.
And then secondly, he gives our main character here like this coin, which turns out to be a vital part of the game or part of the movie later on because it's a resurrection token that allows him to retry at a critical moment. And then at the very end of the movie, it's revealed that he is actually Simon Pegg's character, a real living, breathing person who's the CEO of the company. And he spends all of his time as a librarian talking to random people in his MMO server to try to give them hints as to no wonder this game is falling apart. Your CEO spends all of his time as cosplaying RPing as his librarian in your stupid game. Oh no. This
reminds me of a VR game called Rec Room. And there was this famous video on giantbomb.com, a website about video games, where they were doing like a video, right, showing off this game, and there was a person in the game that was playing this character called Handybot. That was their username. And they were just role-playing as an AI character in the game that was teaching people how to play the game.
No.
And people weren't sure if he was part of the game or not. And he would just say like,
"Oh my god.
Hello, I'm Handybot. How may I help you?"
Then that's going to be the future of outsourcing. Is instead of spending millions of dollars on complex AI, you actually probably have some poor worker in third world countries playing that AI that you just killed in The Last of Us, and you're like, "Wow,
he reacted so realistically."
The developers are smart. Meanwhile, some poor slave-driven kid.
He's clocking out and saying like, "All right, it's your turn next. You gotta
going back to
kill
hole
Bob."
while he exchanges with his sister that needs to go work the 16-hour shifts to satisfy you Last of Us players.
This is also like that game, that movie Gamer, where you were playing as what? Have you seen the movie
Is the movie
Gamer with
called-
Gerard Butler?
Oh, dude, I do remember. Oh, that was such a terrible name. I just remember that was a terrible.
It was a
name.
bad name. It's basically Gerard Butler plays a prisoner who is controlled by this wannabe esports kid, and he has to win the game to get out. And he
I
says,
never
like,
watched this
kid, I was a
movie.
soldier. You need to let me control myself, and I'll
This
make
movie
sure you
sounds-
win this game.
So entertaining. I feel like it would be a great bad movie for me to sit through. I there's another thing. Okay, I gotta make fun of this so bad. So, in the race, the part that we went through a little earlier, I'll get you this specific screenshot because this part at the end is just the worst. Do you remember that at the end there's Donkey Kong, right? Or not Donkey Kong, King Kong that stops the race. He's like, for some reason, the reason that no one's ever been
Finish
able
the
to beat
race.
finish this race. It's been so legendary that everyone's been trying to.
Yeah.
And he gets to the cliff with his car and sees King Kong and he stops and he sees our lady character, who I will look up the name again because I totally forgot. She's getting for it. She's gonna go off this cliff, right? And then she's gonna try to jump King Kong. Which, if you're me in any game, I'm like, that's probably the answer that you have to do to finish this game. And if I wanted to play this game the way I wanted to, I'm gonna go for that jump. Instead, our hero very heroically and very white knightishly pulls her off her bike, and I'm gonna send you this clip right here to save her, quote unquote, save her, which for me would be ruining my game because that's my goddamn jump that I'm gonna try
Do
to
you
make.
really
Who the
want me
hell-
to show this shot?
You gotta show the shot because everyone's gotta see how stupid this movie is. This is the position that they land in after this heroic white knighting, which is also, by the way, the exact same position
Do I
that
got-
every
Do I gotta show
curvy
this?
anime character happens to land into when they bump into another.
I don't want to
Hey,
show
is-
this. Why are you
This
making
is
me do
public.
this?
This is public. They can see this. This was on a movie that's rated G, I believe,
It's PG, I think.
or rated 14, maybe something for kids. You gotta see this. Show it.
There is.
Just show it. Put it up. Everyone's gotta see the context now.
We need
It's
to
so
show
cringy.
it. We need to
So
show it.
cringy.
We're gonna show
Show
it.
Show it.
We'll show you
not-
what
it's not that
theaters
bad.
don't we want you to see.
It's just mentally bad. It's not actually bad.
See,
You're gonna-
you
you're
see,
gonna have
it's
to-
just fine. It's just fine. It's just
Yeah.
Just,
So
just-
as we all know, if we're falling down to save our lives, this is the natural position that most of us assume. Just assume the doggy style position as they taught you in most safety classes. It will protect most of your limbs and also.
the arch in the
you know,
back is
if you
important.
can-
You want to make sure your vertebrae is completely flexed.
Yep. And if possible, make sure you mount the nearest Caucasian male. You know that'll absolutely define.
And the most you can jut your butt out for protection, the
Yep.
better.
This whole thing was terrible. This whole sequence was so
We
bad.
need,
Not to mention-
we need to stop doing this as as creatives.
as I don't know who let this shot through, but it's indicative to the entire tone of how they treat romance in this entire movie.
Can I get this off my screen now?
Yeah, you can take it off your screen.
Thank
I'll
you.
get to my next point now. Okay, what else was really hilarious?
I preferred when we were talking about gravity in our unreleased episode.
Well, Gravity was at least a movie that took itself seriously and executed for the most part quite well.
There's
This
one thing I
movie
did
took
like about
itself
Ready Player.
seriously.
There's
Yeah.
one thing I liked about Ready Player One, and I'll bring it up at the end.
I'll tell you. I'll tell you. My next point is what I actually liked about this movie, but unfortunately, it comes at maybe
At what cost?
the last 10% of the movie is this scene, and if you remember it,
is it maybe it's the
it's
same thing I'm thinking
based-
about?
well, hold on, because before that scene, I'm gonna show you the screen for a second, and if you remember, it's hard to encapsulate in this one exact screen here, but I hope that your trauma will kind of bring the memory back. Before the greatest
You're asking
part
like if
of the
I
movie,
suffered through this movie.
the greatest part of the movie, and it wasn't that great. It was pretty fun, but it wasn't like mind
I
blowing.
say like I just
Is
don't like.
faced by the worst speech I've ever heard in my goddamn life. Do you remember this part when
I
he's trying to
remember.
rally everyone and supposed to give this like super moving speech. Something that you might not know because you didn't read the book. So like I said, the book had a much more solid character development story, and much more believable kind of set of events. I'm gonna follow up this. Sorry to load a bunch more screens to you, but you can take your time with this one. If you remember, there are two Asian brothers that he meets throughout his adventures in the movie. It's quite brief in the movie, but it's much more prominent in the books.
Mm-hmm.
And while he's giving this speech, he's supposed to be talking in the books about the kid's brother who was actually murdered in real life to these characters. So there's so much more at stake here. But in the movie, nobody dies. And so everyone they're talking about is still alive.
They killed the kid?
They killed the kid. The corporation was seriously badass in the book. They were much more like Resident Evil than they were like Team Rocket. In this movie, they're like Team
badass
Rocket.
might not be the word you're looking for.
Well, let's just say hardcore.
There we go.
Yeah. So it has so much more like weight to it because these characters have experienced something serious. Whereas in this speech, he goes on. First off, he throws his ball up, and for some reason, he's allowed to talk to every single person in the entire game and take up their main message video. Like, you know how annoying that would be if you let anyone in the world just be able to talk to everyone else at the same time?
Isn't it like a super hidden item though?
The 8-ball there?
Yeah, isn't it? Isn't
I don't believe they referenced this 8-ball one time before this movie.
Oh, really?
I could be wrong. It could have been that I had some sort of amnesia during this movie.
I thought he had some hidden items and stuff that he chose as like
He did
reward.
have some hidden
and
items. I went through the part where they bought the items. I don't see it in there.
Okay.
But that's all just to say there's another scene that's really... Okay, forget the one that I just sent you. This one here. This one here. So there's a scene where they're showing everyone listening to his message. And it just has
no
on the street in full headset gear.
Oh no!
And they're like in the middle of the street where cars are driving down.
Oh no! This is like when before VR came out and they're making all those like really weird like promotional materials.
And the strange thing to me is like, why do they have the video screen at the front showing what they're seeing? Like, what would be the point of that for anybody?
Also, everyone has a different thing. Also, is one of them just wearing a Vive?
Yeah, one of them is just wearing... Oh, wait, maybe. Oh, that might be it. Yeah, I could, like, the older... The portable one? No, I'm sure they used a bunch of...
Let me put the video... Like, it literally says Vive on it.
Oh...
Like, look at it.
And these people are just like, you're just supposed to believe that they're just chilling this entire time. They were all just hanging out in the, the ghetto with their headsets on, chilling, playing this game.
Is it the ghetto? These are really well dressed individuals.
I know they're really well dressed, but they're in the ghetto. There's freaking there are canisters that they just lit on fire for warmth in the background there. That is hobo-liked set dressing if I've ever seen it.
Look at these gloves, this jacket. Look at this jacket.
I know this is what I think they thought the future looked like in the 70s.
Look at this tier 1 operator with his camouflage.
So he gives this groaner of a speech that's terrible. And as a part of the speech, he mentions like, some of you have found friends, and I even found love. I'm like, Jesus Christ, dude. You're making me cry here. Like, if you imagine anyone messaged you in World of Warcraft and online, or like any game you're playing, and it's trying
I
to
just
give you
got
this
married in
rousing
World of
speech,
Warcraft.
and be like, hey man, you really gotta support us. Check it out. I got a girlfriend, and it was awesome, and I met her through this game, so you gotta help me out. You know how much trolls you would get? I would join that level to fight against him just because of that speech. I would just be a PvP
dare you,
troller at that
Ken?
point.
He's a noble man.
I think that the corporation should have won in this case. To be honest. If you remember, in the end, he just decides to ban the Oasis for two out of the 5 or 7 days of the week because he's got a girlfriend, and we're supposed to believe that the Oasis is what the entire global economy functions on. And he's like, yeah, you can't use it for 2 of the 5 days because I gotta spend time with my girlfriend, and I'm sure you guys gotta spend time with your girlfriends or whatever of that. But whatever, I'm gonna cancel it for for 2 of the Oh. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And my final. Oh, sorry. This was to get to my favorite part of the movie. Do you remember that one of the characters has a glove that allows him to transform into a robot for 2 minutes?
It's a samurai kid, right?
Yeah, the samurai kid, Daito, and of course, he's a Japanese kid, and his avatar's a samurai. He uses it to turn
Because we live in the
into
darkest
a Gundam.
timeline.
He uses it to turn into a Gundam, and I'm just gonna show you that one clip of the Gundam because it was just.
Is it an actual Gundam? I don't even remember.
It is an actual Gundam. They got the license for him and everything. So and it's the original. Oh God, I'm gonna mess this up, but it's like the 00, the original Gundam from the first series.
01? Isn't it 01?
01? Yeah. I think 00 is a series on its own.
Yeah.
My bad. Which is also a great series. But him fighting Mechagodzilla.
Yeah, of course it was
best
written. I remember.
Goddamn part of this movie, and if they just focused the entire movie around this fight, it would have been amazing.
Well, have you seen Pacific Rim?
Well, I was gonna say.
Did you want to just watch
an idea
Pacific Rim?
out into the internet? Maybe I'll be credited in the future if it'll ever happen. But I'm just saying, if you want to make an Avengers level IP that's gonna compete with big box office hits like Chris Hemsworth, you gotta connect Pacific Rim with Gundam, crossover, and here's the storyline. Okay.
Okay.
In Pacific Rim, Japan, they mentioned that how Japan had these emergency underground bases that they built, and you don't really know what happens to them after the second one because the first one you see bits of their robot gets destroyed and stuff like that. But what if this is what spawns their special secret operations Gundam project? And then for Pacific Rim 3, there are obviously bigger, badder monsters that come out for whatever reason, and then the good guys, they're just having a rough time. These new guys, they're too tough. And then suddenly Japan shows up, and it's like this robot, Death Scythe, and all the top tier named Gundams, and that's how they spawn the Gundam cinematic universe.
You think legitimately licensed? It's licensed.
Yeah,
and then you realize that it's all part of the same world. You want them to put an M. Night Shyamalan?
Yeah,
you want them to make Split and then have Bruce Willis show up at the end? Do you not remember this?
I don't know if it has to be M. Night Shyamalan. I think maybe we can get something better on this bestiary / mech film. Wouldn't you watch that if they announced Pacific Rim X Gundam? Who do you think is not going to watch that movie? Right?
Yeah, I'm not gonna say I'm not gonna watch it.
Everyone knows about Gundam. Everyone loves Pacific Rim, and they're just like two giant things you want to see fight each other so badly.
Do the robots cry? Because after The Last of Us, I don't think I can watch any movie unless it makes me feel sad.
Robots hold each other as they die now.
Okay.
And then have baby robot Gundams that grow up with them that you have to murder.
And
then
I want to
Gundam
make a movie
dolls.
called Robots Don't Cry. Because I think that's just a great title. Is that a real thing? Hold on. That sounds way too good.
Robots Don't Cry?
It's a song, it looks like.
You robots.
Yeah.
Dream of Electric Sheep.
Okay, alright. Do Robots Dream of Electric Sheep? The sequel, Robots Don't Cry? It is a song. It is a song.
So, all that is to say that this movie entertained me vastly because I like to be able to point out to someone else how ridiculous all of this is.
What would make this movie
the
work?
Gundam was legitimately enjoyable. What's that?
Let's go beyond the pixel. What would make this movie work? As an artist.
Well, as an artist, I think the execution of the art, I can't necessarily say it was bad because it could have just been the execution of bad instructions or bad design in the first place, which might have been predicated by the script. I think the script is clearly the biggest issue in almost everything here. Cinematically wise, everything was good enough. It wasn't particularly interesting, but I feel that the writing and the specific things that they felt they needed to change from the books. I know you haven't read the books, but they had to change some things, as books always do, because books always have internal dialogue that you can't actually have in movies. So they changed some stuff, but I feel like they changed way too much of the interconnecting plot points, and then they just kept all of the nostalgia, and they thought that they would just ride everything on the nostalgia. Because if you watch the movie, there's so much product placement. Blizzard has like 8 characters in here with Tracer and Jim Raynor in there at some
Oh
point.
my God! Right, Tracer is in this movie. I
Yeah.
forgot about that.
Like a brief. They should have made her a main character. That would have been hilarious. But yeah, I think the script is the biggest thing, because you can just clearly tell none of these characters behave in ways that are realistic to people. You know, like it all seems like a fantasy, like a child's fantasy. The whole premise that he was gonna meet Artemis, this girl, by accident by saving her life or whatever it is, and then she stumbles on his crotch, like like some magical princess, is pretty silly. All the stuff that comes to the character is also very silly in terms of he just happens upon it. He gets like wealth and he gets like money and everything he kind of wants pretty easily without necessarily having to work with it for it. So
Because
it
he's white
doesn't-
and beautiful.
not even for that. It's just as like, well, the problem is that I had this problem with the book, was that it fetishized the idea of being a nerd was going to be good. So the character in the book, just like the character in the movie, knows so much about the creator Halliday, and you can draw that analogy out to any fan right now, anything that knows way too much about a particular IP, like me with Star Wars, than anyone else, right? Like, you can kind of sense that not that kind of like isolation, but that ability to just deep dive and be self-centered and self-focused. But they portray it in a way that's rewarded. So in the books and in the movie, the fact that he knows these really obscure points about video games, about this particular creator, is always the key point that gets him to the next part of the story that unlocks all this mysterious value and gets him the girl and stuff like that. Whereas in real life, it's great to have your topics and hobbies, but don't really expect or rely on the fact that I don't know, the history of the game to make that much of a bearing into your actual life. I think that's the biggest problem with these movies. Like, I joke about them and they're fun, but if I was growing up and for some reason I fixated on this movie, like I fixated on a lot of different movies, I would be getting a extremely weird and skewed understanding of how I think the world should work.
Yeah, totally. I feel like that's also the main complaint with people that talk about the Joker movie. Is there's a lot of people that walked out of that movie theater saying like, "Wow, that was awesome," which is not the intended effect. No one directed that movie wanting you to cheer for the Joker. People cheered for the Joker.
It was unfortunate because it was such a strong movie for people who were able to get the point, but I feel like it confused people who didn't put all the pieces together. Just like
Last of Us.
Fight Club. No,
Oh,
I was
also
gonna
Fight
say
Club.
Fight Club. Massive misunderstanding as to what the premise of the movie was, because they had a montage of how awesome fighting was and how all their lives were getting better. Not better, but they were like bonding over it and everything.
They were
And
standing
then
up to
people seemed
oppression. They weren't
Oppression,
letting.
And people kind of misunderstood the whole idea of how easy it is to get into a mob mentality and how things are pushed too far once you get into that self-echoing chamber. But I think, yeah, that's the same thing that happened to sorry, what you were just talking about.
Joker.
Joker, yeah, it happened to Joker. Yeah. So that's my last notes on Ready Player One. It's a terrible movie, but if you don't take it too seriously, it's kind of funny.
One part that I liked about it is sort of at the end when like Halliday is saying his goodbyes. He's like,
Yeah.
"Thank you for playing my game," and that like that hit me a little bit because
That was your developer. Thank you.
it's just like I always thought games as a relationship between a player and a developer, right? And how there's an interaction there between you spend so much time studying, like, how can I communicate this with the player? Do they get this? Do they understand this? Are they going to have a good time doing this? And when they get through to the end, it's like, Oh my god, they suffered through all that. Thank God they
you
made
actually
it.
beat the game.
Thank God. And then like,
Yeah,
yes,
people don't
thank you.
realize-
Thank you for spending 26 hours playing this thing that likely makes you miserable.
People don't realize, especially with modern games and bigger games now, that we get the stats as to the playthrough rates, and it sucks to find that your game doesn't get beat. It sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks.
Yeah.
or it doesn't even get played. Woo, that
Doesn't
sucks.
even get played,
So
and people go on the internet and complain about it.
But I personally have had to kind of pull myself out of it. It's great to be a part of a successful game or franchise, but you yourself have only so much influence over how much you can shape the game. And it's like a collective will to make the game good, but you can't isolate that down to that many individual people because it's such a network of like effort that goes into it.
Yeah,
And
it's
that's
why
why
you
people-
always never say like I made X game. It's like I worked
Yeah.
on this game with a
And-
bunch of talented people.
You know, and you know, to relate it back to The Last of Us. So, we talked earlier about how they made some pretty big gambits in terms of decisions with their story and stuff. But if you think about that in any studio, how difficult that is, because if it's a really controversial storytelling moment or decision, but it's still the right one, the person who comes up with that idea has to sell that through the entire studio. Because if you don't sell that to the rest of the studio, it echoes in the product, and it echoes in so much of how hard people work on different things if they don't believe that it's the right decision or not. So I always find it very, very impressive when games or studios can make really big decisions or really controversial decisions just because it's really, really hard to steer any group of people that strongly into a different direction.
Yeah.
So when you see people like talk about these changes to games, sometimes it's hard to understand that it's a big ship, and you're the bigger the game, the bigger the cruise ship is, and you know cruise ships are notoriously hard to turn, so it's not an on the dime kind of situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what kind of reminds me of The Last of Us.
It's a miracle any game is made, really.
It
As
honestly
Blood, Sweat, and
really,
Tears
really
said.
is. Yeah. Well,
Blood, Sweat, and
it
Pixels.
amazes me too that if you look at the back end of any game project, they're so vastly different. Like everybody has had to hack so much stuff, unless they're making a super cookie cutter game, like to hack so much stuff to get like whatever engine they're using to work properly to set up their systems, and it happens all the time. Like it's the most complicated civilian system that we probably create outside of like security or defense or something like that.
Even
'Cause
externally too, just how they manage projects. Like for example, Naughty Dog, they don't use producers or any sort of like high level management.
Insane.
Which
to
is
me. That's
yeah, I know.
crazy.
I know.
That's
I talk to my
crazy, yeah.
producer all the time at work.
Yeah, I'm sure
especially
she
if I'm
doesn't like
blocked
that, or
by
he doesn't like
something.
Hey, do you know that Naughty Dog doesn't need you?
I need
I'm sure that
him.
competition goes well. Yeah, that's impressive. I do find that game studios also have the highest variance in terms of project makeup and how they structure their employees.
Yeah, and like that's not even touching on the crunch culture, right?
Yeah, the crunch culture is also another one that's kind of a bit harsh and it's understandable too, just because of game making for such a large portion of the industry is hacked together and very much like do what you can with the limited resources that you have.
Yeah.
That it's hard to not see them crunching, but I can just see it as a hard impulse to resist, but they should be resisting it if possible. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't
I think most of the
I
industry
don't have
started to
I don't
wake
have
up
the
to it.
answers to that. I've had times where I had to do tasks and I'm like, well, because this is a part of the game that's being touched on by everyone, I'm just going to have to take my own extra time to do this if I want it to be at the level where I'm happy with it. And at that point,
So I always think that it's
yeah.
sad because you have to make a personal trade-off as to if you don't do it well enough and spend that extra time, your work looks like it's not as good.
yeah.
But in reality, it's because you don't have enough time, and you could put your personal time in, and you're kind of weighing whether your personal time is worth the hit and quality that is perceived by your managers and other people that work with you, it's really tough.
But I think the thing that a lot of people don't get though is that it's not just I need to spend 8 hours on this task and I don't have those 8 hours to do this task. It's because it's not about your 8 hours, it's how many hours everyone else who are probably doing more important things than you at that time with the part that you need. Right?
Yeah, because
you're working as part of a team. And that's a really hard problem to solve. Because who's to say your part of the project is more important than someone else's at that time? Right?
Or isn't, right?
Or isn't. And like that becomes hard to manage. And if the only time, and I think that's where something like maybe flexible schedules works. And that's something that has worked well in the past for me in previous projects. It's like I don't need to be in the office at the same time as the art department, for example.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If the art department is touching a map in a different project, I'm talking about an older project. If the art department is on the project and they're using the levels and they're checked out and I can't work on them, there's no point in me being in the office.
Yeah.
I'd much rather come in later.
Yeah.
And do my hours, and like I'm not working harder. I'm working the same amount of hours. It's just offset.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then I'm doing my job there, and then artists come in, they see the changes I made to levels, and then they can continue working. I come in, I continue working on my part, etc., etc., etc.
I imagine that could be a partial solution. I always think that it's like it would work for me, but I always think about all the people who have families.
Yeah.
And how like they're in these weird schedules.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's the real toughest part about our industry is when you make that life transition, it is really unforgiving, and you see a lot of veterans take go to places just because they really need a stable environment and they need somewhere that's not going to require random hours of their time when they're already, dedicated to their kids or family.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's pretty much it, I think. And we're running
so.
At 10:30. That's a little bit later than we want to go, as always.
We are over our upper limit of 2 hours for these things.
Yeah.
So I think we call it there, Ken.
I think so too.
That was a roller coaster of an episode.
Last of Us, Melee, and Ready Player One. That was a lot covered.
Yeah.
So follow me at KenHouse604 on Twitter.
Follow
Instagram,
me, Luis Fernando Sandrin, at LLF Sandrin, or just stay tuned to mine Twitch. I'm not doing a lot of streaming. I'm hoping to get back on that eventually, but we'll see how things go in these crazy, as I'm told, unprecedented times. And one thing I've always never done, I want to shout out this song that's playing right now. It's from Adrian Talons, good friend of ours. Amazing song. Thank you so much. And for you watching, thank you for watching. Take care, and we'll see you beyond the pixel.